I'm going to actually just start with something that Lorenzo had said, which is that your writing and thinking seeks to sit at the layered intersections that create opportunities to unpack complexities living with queer, feminist, people of color visions and values. So that intersection, which you so beautifully also sort of gave us context for, Jill, in terms of the connections between different kinds of oppressions, and I think that intersection, that's where I'd like to start, with the intersection of identities as LGBT artists, queer artists of color, and why don't we start with Jill?
I don't know, Lorenzo said it all.
Well,
I think
particularly for you.
Culturally, I think there's maybe it's natural, I'm not sure, tendency, certainly for people who suffered oppression, to sort of circle the wagons around an identity. And that is helpful to build up the strength to go out into the world to face the oppressors, face whatever is going on out there. But I think then the next step for me, has been to, sorry, I will stop banging the microphone with my hand. The next step for me has to be then to look, oh, bang her microphone. Sorry, I was just joking.
I knew you were going to get rowdy. Okay.
Is to think about, the multiplicity of our identities, because none of us come into the world with just one. And it's when I teach, it's very difficult to get students sometimes to step beyond that initial identity that they claim, and think about all the things that they are in terms of the multiple ethnicities, the class backgrounds, the ones they came from, the ones they're in now, their regionalisms, all the different things that make up who we are before you even get to gender and sexual desire. So one of the things that's great about being a writer for me is I'm looking at those different identities when I'm writing characters, so I have to think about them a lot. And it's informed a lot by me thinking about my identity not being a monolithic thing.
Absolutely.
And once I'm peeling back those layers, you find you're much more interesting than you thought you were.
Yeah, I mean, Lorenzo, I'd like you to, I'm quoting you because I think what you said was so interesting. But I'd like to talk about that richness of identities, and in particular your background. You were born here, but you went back to Mexico and was raised there and then came back, and that sort of rich stew that's part of all of who you are as an artist. And
yeah, sure. Yeah, I think spent a good decade or more trying to figure, like the quintessential like coming of age, because like who am I, and I think that trying to figure out who I was. I grew up in California until I was about 10. Then we moved to Mexico and lived there for about 6-7 years, and then came back. And so realizing that throughout that period, I never belonged no matter where I was. Because when I was living growing up in East San Jose in California in the 80s, it was very clear that myself and my people, we didn't belong there, right? And then my public school teachers were very good at telling me that. And then moved to Mexico, and then there I was always the American, right? And I was like, this isn't, my teacher said I'm not American, right? I'm not that thing. But I could never bust out of that there. Even though we moved to Mexico because my father wanted me to be a Mexican. He was afraid because I had forgotten how to speak Spanish, and he was afraid that himself an immigrant, my mother, the child of immigrants, they were terrified of the idea that they were raising a child who was becoming foreign to them. And so we moved to Mexico. And so then NAFTA happened, and we couldn't afford to stay there anymore. My family, they're all agricultural workers now, before they were miners. And so we came back to the United States, and I'm like 16, 17. And again, you're not one of us. You don't belong here. And so I figured out who I am, and so then I heard about this thing called Chicano. Took a Chicano studies class, read a Gary Soto poem, and then found Sandra Cisneros, and then so then I was like, okay, so I'm Chicano. But then, and I was at the time I was a Pentecostal. I was studying to be a minister, and had the first man I ever loved was my pastor's son.
You need to write about that.
I have.
Right?
Had a 2-year torrid affair, and so it came. So stopped doing that, came out, and then went out to look at what, stopped doing him, and then, and so I didn't stop doing that. But I then, went to like Barnes and Nobles because we had a dial-up, and it was a very sad dial-up, living in East San Jose, and going to the little Hispanic shelf, and then going to the little, and I say Hispanic in quotes, and to the gay and lesbian shelf, and trying to piece myself together, and so between stories of like Gary Soto, straight Chicanos, multinationalists, and then stories of white gay men from Kansas who ended up in the Castro, San Francisco, right? And so like both these stories have value, but they're not my story, right? And so it's been like this constant process, and it wasn't until I moved to Texas in 2001 and studied under Sharon. I got to study eventually also under Joy Harjo, through Macondo, Ruth Bejar, Richard Blanco, that I was able to take a step back and realize that there's not pieces that you leave at the door.
That's right.
That you carry the multiple identities all the time. That I am all of these things simultaneously and consecutively and chronologically, and all of that is beautiful, and all of that is messy as all hell, as well, because it's coming from many traditions that are contradicting themselves often. And that the experiences are also layered, right? So that I'm sitting at the intersections while I'm embodying the multiplicities.
Yes.
And so that's what I try to grapple with. And I don't know to what extent I'm successful at that or not, either in writing or in my own life, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I mean, we can be so grateful for all of your narratives, your creative narratives, that you bring us all of these rich aspects of who we all are, I think, and I want to actually now ask you, Sharon, a bit about that, and also you're from or near New Orleans, is that right?
I'm from LA. My father is from Algiers.
Algiers, right. So that's another sort of part of your heritage, and perhaps you can talk about that and other influences in your own pieced together sense of identity as as an LGBT artist, as an artist of color, gender as a woman, and your experiences.
Yeah, I do think I was a boy first for a long time, and that was cute until I didn't grow out of it. And then I think I think up until that point where it became not cute, I knew I was loved. And so I spent a lot of time actually in Memphis, which is where my mother is from.
Yes.
And the LA that I grew up in was really, everybody was from somewhere in the South. So it was like a little southern village. But then after that, through like what was being reflected onto me, I really just learned to hate myself because I felt that I was in the wrong body. Like everything about me was just wrong, It has taken many years and lots of work on all of our parts, but on my part, a lot of work for me to come full circle with not all of my family, but some part, like not all of my family did I feel that from, but from the ones that I did, to learn to love myself. It's been a long journey. And so the thing that I looked to was, why were they so mean? What was that? Because I knew, thank God, I was stubborn enough and willful enough to know that something in there was not about me. Even though for a long time it ate me up from the inside, and I just drank and ran the streets, and it was just wild fun. But too much of it, to an unhealthy degree.
Should
But
left it to a professional.
I know. So
Somebody needed to tell me.
I'd like to, I mean, given all that, and if we can answer these very briefly, we just are really going to shave our discussion, unfortunately,
Okay.
time-wise. But I'm going to let you start, Sharon. If you could just touch on briefly, where did you find the courage to share, to create, and then share your creative gifts with us, your narratives, and what influences along the way helped you on that journey?
yeah, I didn't share work until I was 30. So I wrote to just save my own self and to understand my life and to survive. And in retrospect, what I can also say is I think that my family's prayers, somewhere in there, crazy as they were and as much scuffle as we had, also saved me. So I think at some point later I was able to stand in the love that was in the lineage, even from those that maybe I had not met. And I did feel that I was a little kind of haunted, particularly on my dad's side, by the wild, crazy Louisiana people, by those spirits. And I feel like I had guides. So there is no other reason for me to be alive. Like, I just don't even know how I made it otherwise. And so then as I kind of came out of it, truly the works of so many people that are in this room, they were there. And that's what I think was my guide. You know, along with the spirits, along with my own restless, fighting soul and determination to live, there were these guideposts. So I was lucky enough to come up at a time, you know, where Jewel and Cheryl and Alexis and so many people in this room, Peggy. I mean, I don't even want to start naming, because, but they were there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask you this, Jewel. Now that you're an icon of sorts, and one of, I'd say, lady of arts and letters. You mentioned June Jordan, but where and who, again, where did you find the courage? You were always outrageous and sassy and wonderful and very brave. Where did you get that from, and who helped you allow you to be so brave? What influences?
I would say two things. One, personally, you know, I was raised by my great-grandmother, who was Native American, and she always said, and as a child I was a little puzzled, she said with a twinkle in her voice, and I've been a widow for 50 years. She was clearly happy about this. And they had married her off when she was 14 to a man from another tribe, and she outlived him by, you know, many, many years. So, but her stalwart independence, she was, and she raised a daughter who was also very independent, and they raised me. So I saw them. So to me, being a woman was a fabulous thing. It was interesting. It was sexy. It was dramatic. I mean, my grandmother said to me once, she was probably 70, she said, "Oh, I have to stop having sex. It's really messy, and I always have to do the sheets." So I was getting all these great life lessons growing up. I mean, how, you know, I felt positive about myself. She's the first person who said the word bull dyke in front of me, and she said it as just about some woman she had met at a party. I mean, it wasn't like a bad thing. So that bringing up in that way was wonderful. The other person was Audre Lorde, who I did talk about in this talk, because I talk about her much more in the paper I was quoting from. But Audre was, for me, such a delightful and tough personage. You know, she had that regal bearing and that great accent, and and then this kind of no-nonsense way, and she was so flirtatious and so tough. But she let me audit a class she was teaching at Hunter while I was working as an administrative assistant. And I asked her if I could audit her poetry class, And I was there. I was there when they went through all that shit to get her to teach there, because they were not nice about it. I heard a dean say, "Well, it's okay as long as she doesn't teach lesbianism." I'm like, that's what you have on your mind? And so she let me audit the class, and I had only taken one other writing class, and she actually read my work, which I didn't expect. I just thought she was going to let me sit in the back of the room. So that made me have a sense of myself as a writer and a lesbian of color.
I think, and I think Audrey's been that for a lot of us.
Yes. Yes.
Really pioneering the way for so many of us. Lorenzo, I mean, what special sort of issues have you dealt with as a man of color, as a Chicano, and how have you found the courage to write about loving men and so beautifully?
To me, it's necessary. I forget, someone said, it may have been you, you write or you die. There are many, many great quotes from Sharon, including the first one, "You can't be in this workshop unless you call yourself a writer." I remember that one. I think it's, so coming of age and mourning the fact that in a lot of, like, literally almost, I don't want to say this without making invisible the people who survived, but a whole generation of men was gone. So my mentors, the men, like the older men who I wanted to look up to, the older men I wanted to make love to, the older men I needed guidance, or like they were not there. Either because they were literally dead, or their spirits were so broken down, or they were tired, they were hiding, they survived, they didn't want to have anything to do with younger people, like they just were done. And so looking for their story, like where are their stories? And I found their stories, as I said, some little anthologies here and there, but the heart stories I heard from the women who cared for them, and so I was raised by queer women of color in Texas in so many ways. Like my consciousness was shaped around that, and I'm fearful, although I know I'm not gonna die as soon or because of complications in this particular way. I was talking earlier, like now I have to worry about the fact that I need a retirement plan because I'm not gonna die. But I am fearful that, that generations from now that then this generation needs to document, we need to document. We need to document that we're here, as Jules said, and also need to document that we were mourning, that we are mourning, that, so how do we bring those voices that weren't able to get published?
Yeah.
Because I know they wrote, but they didn't get published, and so who knows where they are, if families burned those stories, once they were buried, because they were, because they died of pneumonia, they died of other things, but never of what actually happened. And so I think in a lot of ways it's real. I really believe it's necessary to create artifact. 100 years from now, when people pick up, I want them to know we were here, and this is who we were. We were a hot mess, and we were trying to figure this out, and we were beautiful in trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
You're all creating very powerful artifacts for the next generations. Very, very quickly, again, I'm so sorry to rush this because I could hear you speak all evening, all of you. And you're going to all have an opportunity to, ask questions of your own. So I do want to sort of move it along so that you can have that opportunity. In the last panel, it was very interesting. We sort of talked about marriage equality, and then Bill Wright read a haunting piece. Now I'm forgetting her name, of a young lesbian from Newark who had been murdered.
Oh, yeah.
Zakia Gunn.
Yeah, Zakia,
Sorry, it
right.
was a very, very horrible situation, and we were all shocked terribly. But sort of like here we have marriage equality, and here we have, continued murders of, gay, lesbian people in New York City, for, you know, where we
Right.
think we're so evolved, around the country, but right here. So it's a very interesting sort of paradox, you know, how we move forward and how, at the same time, there's incredible hatreds and fear and so I'd like to just ask each of you where you see, beyond leaving your own beautiful artifacts, where you see what you see happening in the future, what you think is urgent to resolve, or where we need to be moving. Jewel.
Well, I certainly, I hope for our community to have a more evolved feminist consciousness, so that we make it a priority that women and girls are given full access in the society, and to really be thinking about that consciously as opposed to just, you know, like wearing a button. And, you know, I did get married. I was one of the litigants in the lawsuit against the state of California for the right to marry.
That's right.
Even though I don't actually believe in marriage, I think it's a patriarchal institution that needs to be totally revamped. And, but I do believe in the right, if that's what you want to do. It's like I've always said, it's like sit-ins. When people sat in at Woolworths, it wasn't because the food was good. It was for the right to sit down. And so I think with the big marriage movement, what we start to see, if we can see it, as feminists, there are more than one way to attack an issue. Marriage equality was only one of them. I'm anti-militarist, but I feel like if you're in the military, you should get the exact rights that everybody else gets and not get raped because you're a woman in the military.
Yeah.
So
Here.
I think we have to start to see that you attack things from many, many angles, and I'm hoping our community starts to see that more. And whatever your particular thing is, your particular interest, you take up that banner and see it as part of a struggle for equality in the country.
Yes.
And not sit back and say, oh, well, I don't believe in marriage, so why are we wasting our time on marriage equality?
Let me just shift to my final question for this evening, and that would be just bring us up to date on what you're working on, what you're passionate about, what's in the works, what can we expect from you, and Lorenzo, why don't we start and work our way back this way?
Sure. So I'm about to release a book called Amorcito Maricón, and that's a play on a song from a Mexican song from like the 40s, maybe 50s, called Amorcito Corazón by Pedro Infante, or the song by Pedro Infante, and it's a crooner's song for sure. And the thing in my bio is it's poems from 3 different homelands. So it's writing from the period of my understanding of Mexican Americanism in the 80s in San Jose with all its pop culture references. Then there's my life in Mexico. So it's all looking at love and desire and the inherent politic in that, but using the language of these periods. So in the 90s, living in Mexico and using language that I learned there, and then the 2000s using like this more radicalized Chicano lingo, and also looking at pre-colonial mythologies as well. But so that's exciting, but I started a small press a few years ago called Corima Press, which is a Raramuri term, Raramuri being my ancestors, which means circle of giving. And it's a press that is intended to infuse the Chicano and Chicano canon with queer Chicano and Chicano works. And so there are 6 titles out, 7 titles about to come out next year.
Wow.
And some of them are already getting some recognition. They're being taught in universities. And so that's a lot of my heart is in that. But it's also meant that I haven't written, so that's not good. So I need to find that balance before Sharon comes after me and go back to writing. I haven't written in a couple of years.
Well, all of your contributions are greatly appreciated. It's part of the tension, I think, between being an artist and an activist and you know, someone who is also interested in growing community and nurturing and being, as all of you are, very important educators. Sharon?
The Black Mermaid Man Lady piece, I'm just barely starting to develop and write, and I'll be doing readings of that piece at New Dramatist coming up
Very
next year.
exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
I'm a mermaid person.
Oh, okay.
I'm a mommy water person.
All right.
So I would love to talk to you about that.
I
a
would
little
love
more.
that.
Yeah.
I would love that. And a piece that I've been developing for 2 years called River Sea premieres in Chicago in June. And it's been an awesome journey, lots of support all over the country, and we've just been playing with this piece. And I've been developing the text and the technique to do the piece for 2 years in different communities. And just really briefly, one actor tells the whole story, God bless her, because it's a lot of words. And then through an improvisational process where I use physical language to communicate, I compose with singers, dancers, and the audience in what I call a moving soundscape to support the story that is being told. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Can't wait to experience it myself.
That's deep.
And Jewel,
That's deep.
it's all so deep. It really is. It is. Jewel, what are you working on? What's the next thing we can expect?
I'm working on trying to get some other theaters to produce the James Baldwin play. It had a really great run in San Francisco.
Can't wait to see
So
it.
I'm trying to get other houses interested in that. And I'm doing some research, and I'm working on my next play, which is about singer-composer Alberta Hunter.
Yes, yes.
All New Yorkers know Alberta Hunter. Yes, it's great. And, you know, she was such a tough old bird. I love it. And people always talk about her like she was kind of a bitch, you know. And I thought, oh, I love her. I have to write about her.
Yes, yeah, that'll be.
And her girlfriend, Lottie.
I would love to hear this tale. So now I'm going to.
Lottie was her lover of many years, and Lottie was the niece of the old vaudeville performer Burt Williams of Williams and Walker.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, they had their ups and downs.
So I'm going to turn this now over to the audience. It's been such a privilege to.
Thank you.
Thank
be with
you,
you this
Eve,
evening.
after all
Thank you.
these years.
No.
It's so great to see you.
No, thank you, really.
Oh,
really.
God.
But now, I mean, I'm sure there are many, many questions and conversations that people would like to have.
So we'll take a few questions.
Jaira has the mic.
Got the mic.
You can raise your hand if you have a
I
question.
don't need a mic.
Okay.
Oh, for recording? Okay, so say what. My question actually is for Sharon, a new piece that you're creating. I mean, it sounds amazing as far as the technique. And what was your biggest, well, two questions. One quick answer, is it coming to New York? The bulk of the question is, what was your biggest challenge with developing that technique?
Yeah, with River Sea, the biggest challenge for me was the piece required that I be in it. That's what I discovered. So I'm acting as the composer live, and I really didn't want to. I was terrified. And so I actually avoided it for a long time.
The composer of this kind of sound?
So it's like, yeah, so audience has bits of text. So I do this little rehearsal with the audience before. So some people translate text, some people have, bits of text that are not translated, and they do gestures and stuff like that. And then with the singers and the musicians and the dancers, they also are following my signal. So I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm asking them to give us what's needed. So I might say, we need a warrior dance right now, or we need, the ocean sound, or,
So it's not like tightly choreographed, it's kind of...
It's improvisational. So the text is the structure, so the text doesn't change, and the actor, Sanja Parks, handles that text. But my desire, I feel that the audience, in Black forms, the audience is responsible for the experience. And so I wanted to go further with my desire to activate the room so that the whole room is the performance, and the whole room becomes the site of healing. And also, I've been just so thrilled to find that audiences just say yes, you know, and there's always at least like 6, 7 different languages in the room that people volunteer to offer up to translate text, and you know, so it's been real. But I did not want to be in the piece. I was trying to be the writer. I don't consider myself a performer, and it just, I was terrified, and it took me a little while, and then all I could do was be present. And so I had practiced that with Lori. That's one of the big things that Lori teaches, is really the art of being present. And so all I could do was just know nothing and just be present and authentically respond. And so then so now I can just, and you know, so sometimes it's really great, and sometimes, you know, it was mediocre as I went along, but I figured out what I needed in the structure of the technique.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Other, Alexis? It's a question.
Yes, thank you. Jewel, you once talked about unfettered possibility. And I was just kind of thinking across all 4 of you, Eve included. As artists, as people who identify as LGBTQ persons of color, what does the idea of the possible mean for you in terms of creating art in the 21st century?
That's deep. Yeah.
Retiring from my day job, that's a possibility. Makes all things possible. But I had this moment while I was working recently on this play that if I felt it was absolutely okay that the play didn't get produced, I felt completely free. That what was most important was that I write it down and write it well, and that it would come into the world at some point. Now, of course, I'd like to be there opening night. I got my outfit already. But there was that moment where I felt completely free. Free to do the research, free to do the writing, and not think about, oh God, what's going to happen? And that was a really great moment for me. And I try to pull it back in whenever I start to feel anxious, that pressure. And if I can get back to it, sometimes it feels really good. And I do feel all of the possibilities exist for me if I can hold that inside me. It's a weird thing for such an ambitious person to feel.
Yes.
I think that creating opportunities for us to imagine ourselves possible is where I think I see the possibility, and I think that what I grapple with daily as a writer and a small press publisher is this kind of like this love, more than hate, this love and despise relationship with traditional publishing. And even as I submit books from the press to awards options, and when a book gets awarded, it's exciting, it's whatever, but it's also like this weird, because that's not the point of writing for me. It's that we're documenting the word, again, we're creating artifact. An artifact has all kinds of forms, right? And so I leave it up to writers, do you want to italicize in Spanish or not? You get to decide. Or if you're going to use words in Spanish, I'll ask you when I'm giving feedback, do you want it to, was it supposed to be in Spanish, or is it supposed to be like Spanglish, or is what you heard growing up? So whatever it is, I'll support you with, but we're also going to apply a discipline to it, right? So if it's going to be Spanglish, okay, let's do it. Let's craft it, let's create discipline around it. Or whatever you're going to do with the language, because both Spanish and English, they're both, fundamentally white languages, right? And so, like, if we're going to mess with them, let's mess with them, but let's also apply a discipline to it. And so, but in terms of possibility, I think it's this constant challenge that I think because I think many things are possible, and I think multiple things are possible simultaneously, but there's that tension though, in wanting to wanting to support writers and support myself as a writer, but also just like challenging. And that's been a challenge, being in workshops, sitting next to MFA folks who want to have an opinion about whether I need a comma or a break in the stanza. And coming back to, and going back to the Sharon Bridgeford School of Thought, like, are you bleeding on the page? Is this your truth on the page? That's what I want to know. Is this your truth? And we could deal with commas and whatever later, but do I believe you? Or do you believe yourself? Do you believe the poem? Does the poem have agency?
I feel like so I'm 55 now. Wow. That's cool. Yeah. And I feel like I've like suddenly realized that really I've lived to see that so many things are possible that I didn't think were. And I think for so long I was just fighting the family, just fighting everybody, just fighting. So when I finally figured out another way to be, and then now I realize, oh, my family actually loves me, and I love them, and we work through that shit. I didn't think that was possible, but it is, and it's a reality now in my life. So many people like Lorenzo and Virginia Grice over there, and so many people that when I was younger, they were coming up, and I was coming up and trying to figure out how to apply the things I learned with them in circles. They're now grown and helping me do things that I couldn't have otherwise done. So I think like for me, it's an interesting time in my life, but also I think in the arts, in that there is an opening, because the old way of doing things is crumbling, and so many of us are still here. And so many of us have figured out how to be here in a powerful, healthy, and vibrant way. And we got our posse, we got our people,
Yeah.
We done trained them up, they grown and pretty. And so it feels like a really great time of magic and possibility. It feels like a great time.
Yeah.
And I think we're still, I feel like I'm still discovering what that might become.
Well, Alexis, I'm really not a panelist, but I will answer this question with great joy. The possibility, I think, and again, I'm going to also reference age, so I'm now 56. And one of the great things that happened for me about reaching a certain age was that I felt the freedom to do whatever the hell I wanted to do as an artist. And I had always felt a little resistance as a woman artist because I was a painter. And then I started to work in mixed media installation and collaborated to do theater, and now work in multimedia and create videos, and now very joyfully singing. I think people would say, well, I thought you were a... And yes, I am. But why are you doing... And the thing about being in possibility is those voices that question just don't move me anymore. And I'm very happy to answer those questions if you're confused as to what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. But the beauty of possibility is that, yes, in my 50s, I can finally open my throat, and as my Yoruba priest had told me to use my voice. Well, I said, well, I do use my voice. I didn't know he meant literally, that it was time to sing. And I'm so grateful for understanding that we can live in possibility and really enjoying the process of becoming more and more free. I think actually, I'm getting the signal from Jaira, we've run over so long. That was such a beautiful question for us to wind up on. And I just want to, again, thank you, Jaira, for planning and putting this together with so much love and care. And to tonight's panelists, you were so awesome, so inspiring. Let's give them a round of applause.